Hey, good morning and welcome to the JeepSolid Garage. Today we're going to be taking a look at the installation and review of these rugged ridge fender flares on a Jeep Wrangler YJ. We're going to take a look at what these fender flares are going to look like after 10 years of use, sun and heat and cold, freezing temperatures. I've also got some tips and tricks on the installation. Let's get to it. Today, we're going to be installing our rugged ridge fender flares. This is a 4.5-inch plastic set that we're going to be putting on Project PJ. Just finished painting it. It's looking really good. Obviously, I have the old fenders off, so the surface is all nice and clean and prepped and ready for installation of our new fender flares. Let's take a quick look at what comes in the box. There's our part number for you. So this is the set for the Jeep Wrangler YJ. So we've got a set of front and rear fender flares and these little flares that go on the side, which honestly, I don't think I'm gonna use those though. I don't like the look of those. I'm not gonna put them on. But we are gonna go over the installation. Here's all the parts. On the spacers here, we have a 7mm and 13mm spacer. We're gonna look at the difference in those and where they go, and all of our hardware, some plastic trim that goes on the inside to protect your paint. So let's get started. Step one, we're gonna take our rubber trim here and we're gonna install that on the back side here. They recommend taking a little bit of alcohol and cleaning off this edge. Make sure you have a nice clean surface. And as you can see on this rubber trim, there's a longer side and a shorter side. The longer side is going to go on the top. There's a little red adhesive protector here. We're just going to peel that back and slip it over the edge of our fender flare here. And as we're installing this, we're going to make sure we're not pulling. I'm going to get that first little edge to catch here. There we go. As we're installing it, we're making sure we're not pulling on it because that'll cause it to stretch and then shrink later on and you're going to end up too short. So just put it on without stretching it. Trim on the front fender flare is all set. It's ready to go. It's pretty self-explanatory on the front of which one's driver's side, which one's passenger side. On the rear, if you look at the rear fender flare, you've got the lower side. This side extends down a little bit farther if you hold it level. And if you look at the rear panel on your Jeep, you'll notice that the front side here extends down a little bit farther than the back. So this one will be the passenger side fender flare. All right, let's start by installing the front fender flare here. So they recommend taking a marker light here, putting it in, just so you can line the hole up there, but I don't think you need the marker light. I can see perfectly fine that my hole's lined up right there. We're gonna line up the bottom edge here and the bottom edge down here. Once it's all aligned, I have a little bit of automotive masking tape here. I'm gonna use this to kind of help tape it in place. And then I can mark my holes because we are going to have to drill a few holes on this. Okay, I've got both sides on. I'm happy with how they look. I'm happy with the alignment of the two. They're pretty even. So we can go ahead and drill our holes. We can take the fender off here. Now we've got a quarter inch drill bit there and a little punch here just to mark our spot so the drill bit doesn't skip around on us. When you're drilling on a smooth surface like this, the drill bit has a tendency to want to skip around on you. Some of these that you're marking, make sure that you don't have a seam behind it. You might have to go above or below it a little bit. And on these back two holes here, they actually go through to the engine bay on the inside. So just make sure there's nothing on the back side that you're gonna run into. We've got the front fenders all drilled out. Now moving on to the back, we're gonna align the front edge at the bottom right there And on the back panel, this seam right here, we're going to line the back edge up with that seam. Tape it all down, mark it, and drill those out as well. So here I'm just taking a file and getting any burrs off, just the corner of the file here. And on a lot of these, on the back panel here, make sure you're not going into a seam on the inside. Some of them are up underneath your splash guards under here, so just be careful what you're drilling into. You know how I showed you using a punch to make a little dent so your drill bit doesn't wander off on you? You guys want to see my little whoopsie? My oopsies. There we go. Whoopsie daisy. Oh, big old gouge. I was trying to kind of move the drill bit up this way a little bit and it just slipped on me. So I'm going to get a little bit of touch-up paint. I'm going to mix up, obviously this is my newly painted Jeep. I'm going to mix up a real small batch of touch-up. I'm going to just kind of fill that in and then buff it out. I can clean it up, make it look better than that, but learn from my mistake. And because we have freshly exposed metal there, I like to take a little bit of primer, something to just kind of protect your paint. Anything I can do to help prevent rust, I'll do it. So back here on my gouge, kind of like a deep gouge right there and a deep gouge right there. I'm going to take the teeny tiniest amount of glazing putty, just try to get it in that little groove there and that little groove right there. And then I'll kind of buff that down, mix up my touch-up paint, put a little bit over that and should be good. But that's just a little too deep to just paint it. So, teeny tiny amount of glazing putty. Yeah, I think that'll definitely help so we don't have a deep groove right there, because man, that drill bit sure chewed that up nicely. Yeah, looking better already. All right, didn't know we were going to be using glazing putty on fender flare installation, did we? We're back at it. This is actually a few days later. I had to pause there for a bit, take my kids to their Taekwondo class, then I had work for a few days. So, believe it or not, it's actually a few days later. You might notice I got a different shirt on now. So, got all the hardware set out here, 7mm spacers for the front 3 holes and 13mm spacers for the back holes. Our marker light here, we're going to be installing, it does not come with hardware. The fender flare kit, you got to use your existing hardware to install your side markers. So I've got that hardware here. All right, this side is about done. Let's hop on over to the other side and touch up my paint over there that I messed up. Okay, here I'm gonna mix up the smallest little batch of touch-up paint to fix that scratch. And yes, this is automotive paint designed for spray guns, but I am not gonna go through all the hassle of getting the compressor ready and my paint gun and clean that up and spraying and masking and yada yada. Oh. So we're gonna try this with a little arts and crafts paintbrush here. We'll see how this goes. Can't be any worse than what it is already. All right, yeah, I think that'll work just fine. I'm gonna give it a few more coats here as we go along, but I think that'll do the job. Now for the rear fender flare, we're gonna use 8 of these 7mm spacers and 8 of these bolts with washers on them, and of course 8 nuts. We can line up our fender flare, get our bolt with our washer, spacer, and our nut. And some of these are up inside the panel, up underneath the splash guard there. So you're gonna have to kind of push that back to get this in place. And don't underestimate what a pain it is to get these nuts and bolts in underneath these inner fender liners. It is a bit of a pain. Be patient, you'll get it. And while I'm working on it, I did want to mention you can trim the body of your Jeep a little bit if you want to have some larger tires and you want to take off the corners of your body here, you can. With my little pizza cutter tires here, I'm not worried about it right now. I am going to be getting a little bit larger tire, but nothing that should interfere with that. So I think it'll be fine like this. Once I get this bolted down, should be just fine. All right, that is sturdy. And they have these fancy schmancy little wings that can go on the sides here on these YJs. I'm not going to be using these. Some people complain that they don't fit real well in this kit. And yeah, I could see that. You might need to trim it up if you're going to be using them to get it to snug into that front fender flare there. But I'm not going to be using them. Okay, I think we have this scratch, 85% better. So obviously I got my touch-up paint on there. Then I sanded it down really lightly with some 320 grit just to take off a little bit of the material where it was higher. Then I hit it with some 1000 grit sandpaper, just to kind of help shine it back up. Then 1500 grit sandpaper. Now here's just a little bit of polish. And this isn't a wax, it's an actual polish designed for kind of rejuvenating, getting out scratch marks, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think we're 85% better. So yes, we are done, and overall I'm really happy with the look. The installation was not too hard. Trying to get up underneath some of the inner fender flares or inner fender liners, I mean that was a bit of a pain, but you can get it done. And these are the 4.5 inch wide, which are a little too wide for the tires I have on here, but like I mentioned, I am going to be getting some wider tires. Also, my other tip, yeah, be very careful when you're drilling your holes. Fortunately, I was able to fix that scratch up pretty good there. It's a little defect, but I think it looks okay now. And if you're going to be using these flare extensions, put these on and get them measured before you drill your holes for your fender flare, because those 3 holes there, you're going to see kind of line up with the front, with the body there. So get these adjusted first before you mount your fender flare. Probably the hardest part of this job was getting the rear done and getting the nuts on the back side of this up on the inside. The splash guard back here just really gets in the way. You can pry it away and get some room there, but you might also have some nuts you can remove on that liner. Take those out, create a little extra room. Also, when you're drilling your holes for your bolts, be sure to pay attention to what's behind where you're drilling. Make sure you stay away from seams, you don't get right up against something. And overall, yes, I'm super happy with the installation of these, and they are pretty darn sturdy. Let's take a look at what they look like after 10 years of use. Here is my other 1994 Jeep Wrangler YJ, and these fender flares have been on here at least 10 years. I've had this Jeep for about 8 years. The previous owner had put these on, and they had been installed for a couple years. As you can see, I mean, obviously they're pretty chalky, and actually there's some cracks in it. Here's a little crack right here. Some of the mounting points started pulling out, but yes, this is after 10 years. These are about done and need to be replaced. I think that crack right there actually hit something, clipped a tree or something, which broke that. And the passenger front, you know, the mounting point there is coming apart, a little chalky. And yeah, these have been sitting out in the sun. It gets well over 100 degrees here in the summer, and our winters, we do get freezing temperatures as well. This crack right here was actually from a kid stepping on it after this was, gosh, about 8 years old. Somebody stepped on it here and just cracked it right in half there. But, you know, it's time to replace these. So for the price, I think it's well worth the money. These Rugged Ridge fender flares, they do the job. They hold up fine for years to come. You can make them last longer if you use a product like some Armor All or something, some type of sun protection on them. I wasn't great at doing that, and that's why those other ones are so chalky and faded, but hey, that's 10 years. So thank you guys so much for watching. Check out my next video right up here, and have a good day. Left-handed. Oh, that'll do.